you guys. Welcome to Book Frenzy 2021, elementary version, COVID version, the virtual version, by myself, Cindy Mitchell, and of course, by all of the great reviewers at Kiss the Book. You can, of course, find us at kissthebookjunior.blogspot.com. That is our website that's specifically for elementary level books, be they picture books or novels. You can also, so I want you to know, I'm not going to make any comments about the content labels of the books or about the binding advisory or the audience appeal. That stuff is in your handouts. It's also available on the blog. And so you are the ones who should be paying attention to whether there are any content issues that you should be aware of. And honestly, I started out with 200 books that I had to get down to 50 for this particular 200 books that were rated essential, that I had to get down to 50. And so at the end of your handout, you will notice that there are a few pages of honorable mentions. Oh, there we go, honorable mentions. Because even though those books didn't make the top 50, they would have been the top 50 if it had been a top 100. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to contact me at kissthebook@me.com, but I don't have very much time, so let's get busy. So we are starting with a nonfiction picture book called All the Way to the Top, How One Girl's Fight for Americans with Disabilities Changed Everything. This is written by Annette Bay Pimental, and the pictures are done by Nabi H. Ali. So this is about Jennifer. When she was 8 years old, there were some members of Congress who were trying to get something called the Americans with Disabilities Act passed, but it was stuck. And so Jennifer and a lot of other disabled people decided to go to Congress and talk to them. But there was no way for them to get in there except for to climb the stairs somehow. And for Jennifer, that meant she had to get out of her wheelchair and physically use her arms to claw her way up the stairs to the Capitol. So it's a very extremely inspiring illustration and story. The illustrations are great. There is even a foreword written by Jennifer herself, who is now an adult. Alone is a dystopian fiction novel by Megan E. Freeman. And this is about Maddie, who's 12 years old. She ends up being the only one at a secret sleepover at her grandparents' home. And when she wakes up the next morning, her whole town is deserted. She has no idea what's happened. When she goes to look to find out where everybody's gone, she finds out that not only is there absolutely no one around, but they've even left all of their cell phones behind. So there's no way for her to contact anyone either. Very, very slowly, Maddie learns how to survive this new situation. She finds companionship in the dog of a neighbor that was also left behind. She makes mistakes. She endangers her own life. But 1 year passes, 2 year passes. She has no idea how she's going to continue to deal with the crippling loneliness that she is left with. This is a novel in verse. I sat down, I read it in one sitting. It probably took me about 45 minutes. Yes, I admit I read fast, but it's a very quick read. When you get done, you will have a lot of questions. You'll realize that there are some gaping, glaring logic holes in this book. But then you'll remember how much you loved the experience, how much you felt for Maddie, and you'll be okay. I would love to discuss this one with a group of students because there will be so much talk about all of it. Then we have Becoming Muhammad Ali, which is a biography about Cassius Clay. We have Kwame Alexander, who voices Cassius Clay in poetry. And we have James Patterson, who voices Cassius's best friend Lucky in his prose. Even kids who have no prior knowledge of Muhammad Ali will love this book and be excited as you watch him focusing all of his energy on boxing. The illustrations are in black and white, and they're done by the same artist who did the illustrations in the crossover graphic novel. Next, we have a nonfiction picture book, which is Chicken Talk All Around the World. This is written by Carol Lexa Schaefer and illustrated by Pierre Morgan. You may think that all around the world that chickens and roosters sound exactly the same, but they don't. I love that Schaefer doesn't just give us the chicken sound and the rooster sound, but also give us the word for grandmother, eggs, hen, and rooster. It's a very fun way to travel around the world, especially with a young class. And who doesn't like trying to make the animal sounds? Cinder and Sparrows is a fantasy novel. This is about 13-year-old Zita, who has lived a long life of drudgery as an orphaned housemaid. Then comes a day when she receives a fantastical letter. She is the heir to the manor and fortune of the Bridgeborn family, the magical Bridgeborn family. Zita undertakes the journey to the castle alone and finds that the manor is almost completely empty. There are just two young workers, a boy and a girl, and the cantankerous Mrs. Cantanker, and who is supposed to be there to teach Zita about her magical powers. As Zita struggles to harness and use the magical part of her legacy, she begins to realize that she is being manipulated. There are dark forces that are waiting for Zita to set them free. How can she find the courage and the information that she needs to forge her own path? Though the tone of the book is dark and foreboding, it is not excessive. If your students like the Pennyroyal Academy books, or if they have read the Birdie Bloom series, then they will definitely enjoy Cinders and Sparrows. Connect the Dots is also a novel. This time it's a realistic one, and this is about Oliver Bean and Frankie Figg, who are 12-year-old best friends who live in a suburb of Chicago. One day, a girl, Miranda, comes into town and she looks around the middle school landscape and decides that the boys are going to be her new best friends. Now, their school is named after Preston Oglethorpe, who was a genius who grew up in Elk Grove, made millions and millions of dollars, and then one day disappeared. Now, strange things are starting to happen in Elk Grove, and most of them seem to just be happy coincidences. But there's a group of dangerous men who are lurking in the shadows, and they seem to be after Oliver, Frankie, and Miranda. So, you know the old adage about how a butterfly can flap its wings in the jungle and then hundreds of miles away there will be a hurricane? Well, in this case, the butterfly is actually a jar of mango chutney. Or should I say the fact that there is no jar of mango chutney? What does that all mean? You're going to have to read it yourself. This would be a great book for kids who are moving up from the Diary of the Wimpy Kid books. Count Me In is by Varsha Bajaj. Seventh graders Karina and Chris have been neighbors almost their whole life, but they've never been friends. Then Karina's papa, her grandfather, comes to live with them from India, and Papa actually strikes up a friendship with Chris, and the kids begin to bond. Then one day, Papa and the kids are on their way home from school when Papa gets attacked just because he looks different than everybody else around them. It says well written, it's heartwarming, and it's heart wrenching. It has lots of deep feelings, and there's a touch of humor. Bajaj speaks seventh grade perfectly. She also speaks from experience about trying to find your part of the American dream and about confronting people who hate you because of your color. There are a lot of good surprises in this book also. Curious Comparisons is a nonfiction picture book, a life-size look at the world around you by Jorge Doniger. So how much milk does a cow give every day? 7 gallons. How many balloons could you fill with the air you breathe in just one day? 800. How many grains are in a bucket of sand? Well, that one I'm not going to tell you. Doniger gives us side-by-side, life-size visual comparisons of how these things look so that we can see how much. How many flowers do you bees need to visit in order to make a gallon of honey? Turns out that that is a 4-page spread. So there's lots of back matter and extra flax, and it's just a visual delight. Don't Judge Me is about Hazel, who's a sixth grader, and her BFF, Tori, and they are about to enter middle school. Tori's older brother, Ben, is an eighth grader there at their middle school, and Hazel has a little bit of crush on Ben. Then one day, while Hazel is visiting Tori, she sees Ben, who tries to hide a notebook from her. When she looks at the notebook, she takes the notebook, she finds out that it is actually on each page there is the name of girls who are at or going to go to the middle school. And the boys have made comments about them, their bodies, their intelligence, their looks, and given the girls ratings. And Hazel knows that this is not appropriate, so she takes the notebook and she decides that she is going to do something. Even if it looks like the adults in her life are not going to listen to her, she will gather as many girls as it takes to get somebody to hear what the girls are trying to say. If you have Maybe He Just Likes You by Barbara D, then you also need to add this one to your collection. The topic of sexual harassment in schools is a continual problem, and this is a great way to address it. Now we have a graphic nonfiction book called Draw a Comic. And from drawing panels to using details to show the story, how to use captions, how to write a script, even visiting an art supply to learn about the best pencils and erasers and pens, how to take care of them. This is a story that also has a lot of nonfiction information in it. Even better, the kids who check it out don't actually draw in the book, they draw in their own book. So don't be afraid to embrace this. Now, The Elephant's New Shoe is a nonfiction picture book by Laura Naimi and illustrated by Ariel Landy. This is about Nick, who was in the jungles of Cambodia when he was called to look at a little elephant who was wandering all alone. Why? Because its foot had been caught in a trapper's snare and had been cut off. How can an elephant survive without a foot? It can't. But Nick was determined, and finally, through a lot of calls and visit, he got the people at a local orthotic school to help him figure out how to make a shoe for an elephant. It's a beautiful story. There are some photos of Nick and Shook in the back matter, and it's perfect companion for Beauty and the Beak by Deborah Lee Rose. You can even check in on Nick and Shook by looking them up on the internet. Eva Evergreen, A Semi-Magical Witch, is a fantasy novel. It says about Eva, who has just 1 month to prove that she is worthy to become a novice witch. Her powers seem to be very small, and using them exhausts her. She has been sent to the town of Arteri to prove herself, but the mayor is not excited to see Eva because she doesn't believe that she can do anything to help. And she's given her an impossible task. She has to somehow prepare the town to weather the culling, which is a mysterious weather-related force that aims deadly forces at towns all over their realm. So, okay, doing a really bad job of explaining this, but I love getting to know Eva. It would be a great nighttime read aloud. Unfortunately, I don't have any children at home anymore, so I can't test it out on my own. Her challenges that Eva faces are action-packed and they are dangerous, but the story is steady, it's interesting, and it's not one of those books that I would come back to after several weeks. It's one of those books that I kept up day after day until I finished it. There is set up for a second book, and I don't know when that one's coming out. Fighting Words is by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. This is about Della, who's 10 years old, and her sister Suki, who is 16, and they have just been placed in foster care. It should have happened years ago when their mother was put in jail because of her drug habits, but the girls were instead left in the care of Clifton, who is not their father. Then something happens that spurs the girls to run. Well, it spurs Suki to take Della and run. And now Clifton is in jail awaiting trial. Now, Suki has always been there for Della, watching out for her, making sure that everything's okay. But Della realizes that somebody also needs to watch out for Suki. This is a hard-hitting, raw story that deals with the after effects of sexual abuse. Suki has had to grow up fast, and Della swears a lot, but as she tells the story, she uses the word snow instead of swear words. So that's brilliant. But she's coming to terms with what Suki had to put up with in order to protect her. The abuse is very carefully handled, and it comes from the point of view of a 10-year-old. It's very appropriate for elementary school. As if you're older, you'll bring more to it than someone who is younger. Back to picture book, we have The Finger and the Nose by Paula Merlan and illustrated by Gomez. Sophie's bad habit is her parents' bane. That finger even has a name. She calls it Tim. Tim feels right at home up there, and it makes himself a fine, comfy palace. He even invites friends over. Then one day, Sophie really looks in the mirror and realizes that her nose is huge. After a good talking to with Tim, Sophie realizes that things have to change. Gross and hilarious all at the same time. I can't remember a more clever book to hopefully encourage anyone to stop picking their nose. Fortunately, The Milk is by Neil Gaiman. It is a chapter book and would make an excellent read aloud. A family is out of milk, and when the father runs to the corner store to get some, his return home is delayed by time travel, pirates, a hot air balloon, flying stegosauruses, vampires, and aliens who want to redecorate the galaxy. It's an absurdly hilarious tale that will have have you shaking your head and laughing in turn. The brilliant illustrations match perfectly the farcical plot that will delight you. You know that Neil Gaiman made this up for his own little boy as a bedtime story. I think it's awesome. Ground Zero is a novel about 9/11 by Alan Gratz. In 2001, Brandon has gotten in trouble, and so he has to go spend the day at work with his dad. His dad is a chef at the restaurant on the 107th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. Flash to 2019. Reshamina is a poor village girl in Afghanistan who's just trying to survive the skirmishes between the Afghan rebels and the American soldiers, the same American soldiers who killed her sister on her sister's wedding day. And what does Reshamina even know about why the Americans are there? Wow. Gratz could have written an entire novel about each of these characters separately, but by entwining their stories and putting them in juxtaposition, he creates an even more powerful narrative. Even students who weren't born yet on the day back in 2001 will get a glimpse into what it was like for the people who were trying to escape the towers. And then all of us get a look into the life of ordinary citizens of Afghanistan whose lives are shaped every day by the war. Gerpel and Preen, A Broken Crayon Adventure is by Linda Sue Park and is illustrated by Debbie Ridpath-Owie. The robots, Gerpel and Preen, are in trouble. They've crash landed and their pods, or crayons, are scattered all over the terrain. They need help. However, as they break the pods, nothing that comes out seems to be helpful. As Gerpel frets, Preen has the flash of an idea. I heard Park talk about this book about a year ago, and I was really excited to see it. The concept of breaking a crayon to release the item inside is going to lead to many, many, many more broken crayons. But crayons get broken all the time anyway. Harlem Grown is another picture book, and this is by Tony Hillary and illustrated by Jesse Hartland. Across from a public school in Harlem, there was a vacant lot filled with trash and refuse. Tony Hillary enlisted the students of the school to help clean everything up and plant a garden. To this very day, the students help grow fresh vegetables, fruits, and herbs in this plot. Hillary is telling his own story. It's a story that inspired many more gardens to sprout. And he even created a nonprofit organization to help even more. If you have a school garden, or maybe if you read Seed Folks in any of your classrooms, this would be one to add to your collection, but you should have it even if you don't have a garden. I Will Dance is by Nancy Bo Flood and illustrated by Juliana Swanee. This is about a young girl who was not expected to live even 1 minute, but now it's been 10 years. 10 years that she has been in a wheelchair because she can only move her body a little bit. Her heart yearns to dance, but it's only when she finds the Young Dance Company that she finds a home, a dance home, that truly works to incorporate every person of every type into the dance. The Young Dance Company is a real place. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a place that should be replicated in every dance studio in the entire world. From the first page, you can feel the girls yearning, and Swanee really visually shows us the magic of connecting through dance. Indian No More is by Charlene Willing McManus with the help of Tracy Sorrell. 10-year-old Regina Pettit is Umpqua and has lived on her reservation her whole life. But it's 1954 and the federal government terminates her tribe, declares it to be no more. And so they have to go to participate in the Indian relocation program and then move to Los Angeles. Suddenly she's Indian no more. The other children in her neighborhood have never met a Native American, and they're confused because she doesn't look anything like the Indians that they've seen on their TVs. And every day she's faced with racism and misconceptions and micro and macro aggressions as they adjust to their lives to live as Americans. Like me, you may not have known that in the 1940s through the 1960s, the federal governments actually forced Native Americans to assimilate by terminating their rights to be a tribe. And McManus uses Regina to tell the story of the demise of her own tribe. There is an appendix at the end, which includes a glossary, and there is an author note from McManus, complete with photographs and a short history of the Termination Act. The Invisible Alphabet is a picture book by Joshua David Stein and it's illustrated by Ron Barrett. Gone, clear, disappeared. These are all different ways to talk about something that is not there. Stein has a deft collaborator with the illustrator Barrett, who did Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. And this is about words and situation to describe something that is not there. I would share this with almost any age reader or writer. It would be awesome as a way to spark discussion and creativity. Maya and the Rising Dark is by Rena Barron. This is about 12-year-old Maya who lives on the south side of Chicago, loves the fantasy stories that has been told to her by her father, especially about the Orisha, African spirits who created the universe. Then strange things start happening around Maya. She thinks it may just be her anemia acting up, but then her father disappears. Maya and her two best friends have to set off on a dangerous quest to save him. On their journey, they discover ancient magic that's been hidden in plain sight and power deep within all three of them. I love that Maya is an ordinary girl. She doesn't stand out academically, socially, or even athletically, but she's determined to do the right thing even when it's scary. So Nature's Light Spectacular is a nonfiction picture book. If I were to say to you, well, when you hear this, you think, oh, Northern Lights. Well, yes, definitely the Northern Lights, but Flint and Lee explore 10 other natural light-based phenomena. That Lee sets the stage with her gorgeous illustrations, and then Flint embellishes each with a case study from somewhere around the world, a simple scientific explanation of the phenomena, and then pop out boxes with extra details. So Nevermore, The Trials of Morrigan Crow is by Jessica Townsend, and it's the first book in a trilogy. So Morrigan is a cursed child. She was supposed to die at eventide, which was the end of the current age. But when that time arrives, she is actually offered a way out and finds herself in a whole different world. And then she finds out that she is a wondersmith, a particular kind of wondersmith who can actually use wonder on her own to create. But the wondersmiths are feared, and so she has to keep her talent secret, and she has to compete for one of only 9 spots available for a membership into the Wonder Society. Now, this book actually came out back in 2017, but somehow I missed it. And now I've read all 3 books, and I absolutely love them. And I hope that you'll put all 3 of them on your shelves. Okay, Noisemaker is a collective biography written in graphic novel format. Not only does it tell us the story of 25 famous or maybe not so famous women, but each of the stories is illustrated and written by a female author illustrator. I would love to buy several copies of this book, and then after getting permission from the publisher, I would take it apart and make binders for each of the biographies, because there are a lot of different things that you could do with this in a creative classroom. Not a Bean is by Claudia Guadalupe Martinez and illustrated by Laura Gonzalez. So it's part Spanish counting book, part moth life cycle narrative, as it follows the jumping bean caterpillar, which is actually inside a seed pod, not a bean. There is a glossary of Spanish words and an author note with additional information, and it's told in rhyme, and it's a really great little introduction to this little known wonder of nature. There are actually several websites that you can go to legally buy jumping beans to share with a class, and the U.S. Food and Drug Administration considers the moth to be harmless. Old Rock is Not Boring is by Deb Paludi as a picture book. The plants and animals that live around Rock think that his life is boring because he has never gone anywhere ever. But Rock explained that he has actually done and seen a lot over the course of Earth's history and is very happy with what he has done. This is a great way for young readers to learn about geography and the historic Earth time periods without realizing it's learning. It also has a great message about the different ways that we all live our lives and about being gentle with each other. On Account of the Gum is written and illustrated by Adam Rex. A little girl finds out that it is a seriously bad idea to fall asleep while chewing your gum. Rex's words and illustrations are absolutely hilarious. This homage to the old lady who swallowed a fly is a comic delight. The Paper Kingdom by Helena Curie is illustrated by Pascal Campion. His Aunt Clara couldn't come over to tend him, so Daniel needs to go with his mom and dad on their night janitor job. As they pick up paper, straighten messes, sterilize the kitchen, his parents tell Daniel all about the king and the queen and the dragons that mess up the kingdom every day. And they tell them that they're doing this job so that hopefully someday Daniel can be a king and keep his kingdom nice and neat. Rhea is telling us a version of her own life story because her parents were night janitors when she was young, and she weaves the magic into the storytelling. Campion's illustrations are ready for you to fall in love. Pet That Dog, a handbook for making four-legged friends by Gideon Kidd, Rachel Brannigan, and illustrated by Suzanne Hoffman. Have you ever wanted a dog? Maybe you'd just like to pet one. The authors tell you almost everything that you need to know. Also, there is a great section about dogs from history like Balto, like Stubby, Buddy, the first seeing eye dog in the United States, information about adoption, and even a quiz to see what kind of dog may match your personality the best. It's perfectly paced with just the right amount of illustrations, and the illustrators' cartoons are a great way to imagine yourself with your own dog. The Proudest Blue is a picture book about Fiza, who is so proud of her big sister Aisha because it's Aisha's first day to wear the hijab. And she has chosen to wear a proud blue, the blue of the ocean or the sky. As Fiza and Aisha walk together to school, she wants to see to see her sister on the big kids side of the playground and give her a hug and a big smile. And even though there are some mean boys who say things, Aisha and her friends turn away. So it's easy for Fiza to learn how to be strong too. So the author, Ibtihaj Muhammad, is the first woman to run in the Olympics in a hijab. And so she's telling a bit of her story in this way. Race to the Sun is read by Rebecca Roanhorse. And this is about a 7th grader, Nizoni, who has always wanted to be a hero, but mostly she just finds herself in trouble. She knows she can see monsters where others can't ever seem to see them, but the monsters have never bothered her until one day they come to her middle school basketball game. Now Nizonine has to gather her best friend and her little brother and go on a quest on the Rainbow Road to the Sun in order to learn how to use her powers and to save her family. So this is from the Riordan Presents imprint from Disney Hyperion. So it again, this in time we are learning about, I believe we're learning about a Native American culture this time. I forgot to write down. I'm so sorry, you guys. So next we have Raj's Rule for the Bathroom at School by Lana Button and illustrated by Hatem Ali. Raj is firmly in the camp of don't use the bathroom at school. He's happy to share all of his tips for avoiding the bathroom all day until he sneezes. And you know, once you sneeze, you're going to have to pee. What a great conversation starter. It's a wonderful melding of bouncy illustrations with a rhyming text that works really great for read aloud. Parents who are worried about their child starting school should definitely read this to their kids. It'll be a good one for preschool or kindergarten teachers for the classroom reading, just because it's going to make you laugh every time you read it. Rare and Blue, Finding Nature's Treasures by Constance Van Hofen and illustrated by Alan Marks. Within its pages, we meet 8 rare and endangered species that are also blue, from the tiny blue butterflies to the Tibetan blue bear. That's right, I said it, a blue bear. And the illustrations are spectacular. Read this book if you don't want a story is by Richard Phillips and illustrated by Eric Zells. The book is adamant that it is not going to tell a story of any kind. However, the page numbers and the pages have something quite different to say about that. I love the humor and the whimsy of books with clever plots that surround interacting with the idea of story. I'm going to have to make a list for you now because I think there's at least a dozen books that I come up with that revolve around the same concept. And I think there's plenty of them now for the use for an entire language arts unit on the concept. Sheepish, Wolf Undercover is by Helen Yoon. Wolf thinks that he's being very clever by disguising himself as a sheep and sneaking out into the sheep's compound. But the longer he stays, the more he gets to liking the sheep, and he decides that he just can't carry out his fiendish plan. Imagine his surprise when the sheep follow him home and ask them to come back because they like him too. So much fun. Yoon's illustrations are a great complement to her story, has the right amount of comic relief and a great ending. Stand Up Yumi Chung is by Jessica Kim. This is about Yumi, whose parents have enrolled her in a test prep class to get her into a prestigious middle school, but a case of mistaken identity lands Yumi in an afternoon comedy summer camp instead. which is great for Yumi because not only is it taught by her favorite stand-up vlogger, Jasmine Jasper, but this will give Yumi a chance to follow her dream of being a stand-up comic. For kids who love Patterson's I Funny series, they'll find this a similar read, but it's less based around corny jokes and more about how to actually be a comic. And we get a chance to see lots of Yumi's Korean culture. So Stargazing is by Jen Wang, and it is a graphic novel. This is about Christine and Moon, who are both Chinese American, living near each other in a Chinese American suburb, that they're very different from each other. Christine has a very traditional household, while Moon has only her mother, and they're struggling to make ends meet. And so Moon is a little bit emotionally neglected. Moon claims that she can see celestial beings in the stars, and as the two become friends through going out at night and looking at the stars, Christine learns that there is something dangerous and bad that's happening in Moon's life. And she has to decide whether she is going to be the kind of friend who keeps a secret or the kind of friend who gets Moon the help that she really needs. Moon and Christine and their friends are very believable, and once you start, it will be very difficult to not to stop. You'll just want to finish the entire book. Things Seen from Above is about April, who's a sixth grader, and she works during the fourth grade lunch to monitor the buddy bench. But as she works, she notices that Joey is always by himself and dragging his feet through the bark pieces on the playground. One day, she finally climbs up on the jungle gym to see if she can figure out what he's doing, and realizes that he is drawing pictures in the bark that can only be seen on a very large scale. Now, not only do we meet April and Joey, but we also meet Veena, who is newly arrived from India, is an excellent candidate for a classroom read aloud, and a great way to help students to see people from a new perspective. This is a book to read with a worm. Is by Jody Wheeler Toppin and is illustrated by Margaret McCartney. The first instruction: go find a worm. Take the kids outside, help everybody find a worm. Then follow the author's instructions to investigate your worm, not just its looks, but how it's worked. The last instruction: go put the worm back where you found it. Now, I can't testify how many of the worms are going to survive the hands of your budding scientists, but I do know that it looks like a lot of fun to occupy a whole class for a solid hour. There will be lots of giggles and shrieks, but there will also be a whole lot of fun. This Is a Dog is by Ross Collins. Well, Ross Collins may think that he wrote the book, but the dog is actually in charge. He goes along through the book, stealing the focus from every other animal by grabbing the crayon and even changing the crocodile's name to Dog. He gets bolder as the book progresses and eventually irritates a bear and a gorilla. Maybe the dog is taking it a little bit too far. It's so happy and silly, this little picture book. It's a great introduction to working together and not taking over, but you'll love it just for the silliness of the dog. So, I mean, yeah, every book doesn't need a message. What About Words is by Ryan T. Higgins. Yay! Tiger is petrified of worms. He loves flowers, but can't enjoy them because there might be worms in the dirt. He loves apples, but he's afraid that if he bites into one, there might be worms. And Tiger even loves books, but again, he's scared of bookworms. Adorable. I love all of Ryan T. Higgins' books, and this one's no exception. The tiger's increased worrying is funny, but it's the worms who want to comfort him that are ever so endearing. When Spring Comes to the DMZ is by Uk Bae Lee and translated from the Korean by Chung Young Won and Eileen Won. For 65 years now, there is an area between North and South Korea called the Demilitarized Zone. It's only 2.5 miles wide, but it's 154 miles long. There are no people allowed, so it's become a wildlife sanctuary. Every season, the boy's grandfather comes to the DMZ to climb up on the observatory and look north to remember the family and the friends who are on the other side. It's beautifully illustrated by the author. The contrast between the wildlife scenes and the barbed wire and the wreckage that is left behind is striking and heartbreaking. And it's an interesting way to introduce the concept of the stalemate between North and South Korea. When Stars Are Scattered is by Victoria Jameson and Omar Mohammed. This is also a graphic novel. Omar and his non-verbal brother Hassan have been living in a refugee camp for 7 years. Their father is dead and their mother is missing. When the opportunity to go to school and learn English and have a chance at a better life comes along, Omar has tough decisions to make. Jameson uses her experience as a graphic novelist to help Omar bring his own story to life, and he lets him tell his story through her skill. So we're almost done, you guys. Just be patient with me, and I think we're going to get through all of the books. When We Are Kind is, change the picture. When We Are Kind is by Monique Gray Smith and illustrated by Nicole Neidhart. And it's been translated by Mildred Waters, because this is a bilingual picture book. Explains how children can be kind and receive kindness, and simply expressed in beautiful illustrations with text in both English and Diné. The story is told from a child's perspective, so they tell what they would do rather than being told what to do. The illustrations of the Diné families are beautiful and colorful. The text is heartfelt and is applicable to any child, really any human in the whole world. When You Know What I Know is by Sonia K. Salter. When 10-year-old Tori tells her mom that Uncle Andy molested her, her mother doesn't believe her at first. It has to be a misunderstanding, wasn't it? Tori is filled with shame, anger, and confusion. Her whole life has been changed in just a few minutes. Her every thought is consumed with the what ifs, and it takes a while, but finally someone starts to believe her. So Salter is told this story in free bursts, and it's a perfect way to capture the thoughts of a child who has experienced trauma. Don't be afraid to embrace this book. It does not focus on the abuse. It focuses on the feelings and the healing that needs to come to survive the trauma. The person that reviewed this book has family members who have experienced this type of abuse, and she said that she would be comfortable with any of them reading this book. Okay, just 3 more books. Yes. So Winterbourne Home for Vengeance of Valor is by Allie Carter. 10-year-old orphan April has spent her whole life in foster care. Then she's taken in as the ward of the Winterbourne Foundation, along with 4 other orphans. With her penchant for curiosity and exploring, April manages to find a mystery. The missing Winterbourne heir, Gabriel, is hiding in the mansion. He refuses to cooperate when April insists that he reveal himself, and eventually all of the children get involved in Gabriel's life and death story. There's a lot of mystery and magic in here. There's a whole lot of questions that are still unanswered for future reading. In fact, book number 2 has just been released. A Wolf Called Wander is by Roseanne Perry. When Swift's pack is scattered and killed by a rival pack of wolves, he finds himself alone, searching for food and companionship. With the help of Raven, Whiff survives by using his wits, the lessons he learned from his father, and the life lessons that come from experience. This is based on the true story of a collared wolf, number OR7, who made an amazing journey from the Pacific Northwest. Perry's story is easy to read, engaging, and informative. It includes an afterword with wolf facts and more information about Wolf OR7. Okay, our last book. You're invited to a Mothball, a nighttime insect celebration by Lori Griffin Burns, with photography by Ellen Harasamowicz. What's the best way to meet the moths in your backyard up close and personal? Host a Mothball. With the right kind of lights, some bait, and a large white sheet, you can invite some of the 150,000 different species to come and hang out overnight with you and your friends. It's well explained with all the details, and the photography is exquisite. It includes a recipe for the bait, a list of the supplies that you need, and great information about moss. And I happen to know that the person that reviewed this book has actually held 2 mothballs over the summer since this book came out. There is a bibliography and a great bunch of websites to explore. So there you go. There are 50 new books for you to explore for your library. Don't forget to look at the books that are at the bottom back of your handout, to look at some of our honorable mentions, because like I said, it should be a top 100 this year, not just a top 50, but I don't have long enough to talk. So it's great talking to you guys. Hopefully we will get to see each other again very soon. Bye.